The trees around them bled a thick, black sap when touched. We discovered it by accident. It was our second night at Alder Ridge Campground, one of those public places just off a state highway. Gravel loops, numbered sites, picnic tables bolted into packed dirt. The kind of place families stop at on road trips. You could hear traffic sometimes if the wind shifted, a long soft hush of tires somewhere beyond the hills. We'd pitched 2 tents at Site 14. The fire pit still held warm coals from dinner, and someone down the loop was strumming a guitar badly but enthusiastically. It was normal, comfortably normal. Then Mark leaned back against a tree. He jerked away immediately. Ugh, what the hell? We all turned. His palm was smeared with something dark, almost oily in the firelight. Tree sap, Jess said automatically. Mark wiped his hand on his jeans, frowning. Sap isn't black. We walked over with our headlamps. The bark of the pine behind him had a split running down its side, and from that crack something thick was slowly pushing out. It wasn't amber like normal sap. It was glossy and pitch black, the color of wet asphalt. Mark prodded it with a stick. The sap stretched before breaking, hanging in a string that glistened under the beam of his light. Maybe the tree's diseased, I said. It smelled wrong. Not the sharp, resinous scent of pine sap. This smell was deeper, earthy and metallic, like wet soil mixed with something faintly rotten. Jess wrinkled her nose. That's nasty. We wiped our hands with wet wipes, joked about mutant trees, and went back to the fire. But later, when I checked the spot again, the crack in the bark had sealed. The sap was gone. Morning made everything feel less strange. Families had arrived overnight. A minivan unloaded bikes 2 sites over. Someone's golden retriever trotted happily between tents. The campground host drove past in a golf cart, waving. In daylight, the forest looked ordinary. Rows of tall pines, dry needles blanketing the ground, picnic tables spaced neatly between trunks. Mark insisted on showing us the tree again. This one, he said, but the bark was smooth. No split, no black residue. Are you sure? Jess asked. Mark frowned harder. Yeah. I touched the trunk. Nothing. Dry bark. We shrugged it off. Trees leak weird things sometimes. The first real oddity happened that afternoon. We'd gone for a short hike along a loop trail and came back around 4. The sun filtered through the trees in dusty gold beams. Kids were roasting marshmallows at a nearby site even though it was hours before dark. When we stepped into our clearing, Jess stopped walking. Wait. What? The tents. They were still there, same colors, same spots. But the trees around them looked different. At first I couldn't say how. Then it clicked. The big leaning pine beside our fire pit, the one we'd tied the lantern to the night before, was now behind Mark's tent instead of beside the table. That's not right, I said quietly. Mark squinted around. Did we set up on the other side? No, Jess said. She walked over and touched the bark of the leaning tree. Her fingers came away black. The sap oozed slowly from a hairline seam in the trunk. Thicker than before. Glossy. Alive-looking. Okay, Mark muttered. That's new. Jess wiped her hand on the grass. The stain barely lightened. The smell drifted up again. That same damp, metallic scent. But this time there was something else underneath it. Warm. Almost animal. That night the campground grew quieter than it should have. At first we didn't notice. The guitar stopped. Families went into tents. Fire pits dimmed to orange coals. But around midnight, while we sat by the dying fire, the silence felt heavier. Where's the highway? Jess asked suddenly. We listened. Nothing. No distant traffic. No wind in the branches. Even the dog from earlier wasn't barking anymore. Mark tossed a pine cone into the fire, cracked loudly in the stillness. That's weird, he said. Then we heard the knocking. Far away at first. Talk, talk, talk. A hollow sound echoing through the trees. Woodpecker, I suggested weakly. At night, Jess said. The knocking continued. Slow, measured. Talk, talk, talk. And every time it sounded, a drop of black sap slid from the leaning tree beside us and hit the ground. Plip, talk, plip, talk. We watched it happen 3 times before anyone spoke. Is that reacting? Mark said. Probably coincidence, I replied. But the next knock came immediately after Jess shifted in her chair. Talk, and fresh sap bulged from the bark. We all froze. Mark stood up cautiously and placed his palm against the trunk. The sap surged outward. A thick ribbon spilled down over his fingers. He yanked his hand away. Jesus! The sap clung to his skin like tar. Pulsed once. Then stilled. Jess whispered, "It knows we're here." No one laughed. We tried washing Mark's hand with bottled water. The sap wouldn't come off. It stained his skin gray-black, soaking into the lines of his palm. And the smell intensified. Not rot. Not exactly. More like something breathing underground. By then the knocking had spread. From different directions. Talk, talk, talk. Each sound echoing through trunks around the campground. I looked out between the trees. Other campsites were dark. Too dark. Where are the people? I asked. No answer. Mark shined his headlamp toward the nearest RV site. The trailer was still there. But the door hung open. Empty. Jess whispered, "I don't like this." Neither did the trees. Because they had moved again. I noticed it slowly, the way you realize furniture has been rearranged in a familiar room. The trunks around us had crept closer. Just a little, but enough that the clearing felt smaller. The leaning pine now loomed directly behind our fire pit. Sap leaked from multiple seams in its bark. All pointed toward us. Watching, the knocking stopped all at once. The silence afterward was worse. Mark wiped his hand on his shorts again. The stain had spread up his wrist. "Guys," he said. We looked. The black sap was slowly sinking into his skin. Not sitting on it. Entering it. Jess backed away from the trees. "Let's leave." We packed in a hurry. Sleeping bags shoved into packs. Lanterns switched off. Fire scattered with dirt. But when we turned toward the campground road, the path was gone. Not physically. The road still existed. But between us and it stood a dense wall of trunks we didn't remember being there. Dozens of them. Every one leaking black sap. The smell rolled through the clearing like breath. And somewhere deeper in the forest, the knocking resumed. Faster now. Tock 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 tock. Mark swore under his breath. That wasn't there before. No, Jess said quietly. It wasn't. The trees had formed a ring around our campsite. That was when we noticed the plaques. Small metal signs nailed into several trunks. Weathered, half hidden by bark growth. Mark wiped sap from one with his sleeve. The engraving read, "Alder Ridge Campground. EST 1952. Former site of Alder Ridge Lumber Mill." Another plaque below it, "Memorial Grove." Jess read the smaller text aloud. "Dedicated to the workers lost during the Alder Ridge Mill fire, October 17, 1951. I felt the ground drop in my stomach. "How many?" I asked. Jess leaned closer. Her voice went quiet. 37. Behind us, the leaning pine split open wider. Sap poured down its trunk like blood. And the knocking came again. But now it was coming from inside the trees. Hollow. Trapped. Talk. 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 Mark looked at his hand. The black stain had spread to his fingertips. Then the bark of the nearest tree bulged outward. Just slightly, like something inside had pressed against it. Jess whispered, barely audible, "They're not trees." The sap dripped faster. Thick, patient. And every trunk around us leaned just a little closer, as if listening for the moment we finally stopped moving. Their camp chairs were arranged in a circle around a spot of disturbed soil. We noticed it right after pulling into Site 23. The campground was busy for a Thursday evening. Families unloading coolers, a pair of kids riding bikes in slow loops along the gravel road, someone a few sites over struggling to start charcoal in a dented grill. Pine trees rose in neat rows around the numbered clearings, their branches creaking softly in the wind. From somewhere beyond the ridge, you could hear the distant hush of highway traffic. It all felt normal, except for the chairs. 6 of them. Folding camp chairs, cheap ones, the collapsible nylon kind you get at sporting goods stores. They were arranged neatly in a circle in the middle of the campsite, all facing inward toward a patch of dark, freshly turned soil. No one was sitting in them. No cooler nearby. No tent. No fire in the pit. Just the chairs. Jess parked the car and leaned out the window. Are we in the wrong site? I checked the small wooden post beside the road. 23, I said. Same as the reservation. Mark stepped out and stared at the circle. That's weird. The soil in the center looked damp and loose, like someone had dug there recently and then tried to smooth it back over. But there were no shovel marks. No footprints in the surrounding dirt. The ground around it was covered in dry pine needles, completely undisturbed. Jess walked closer. Maybe the last campers forgot their chairs? 6 of them, Mark asked. Maybe they were a group, but they just left them here? No one answered. The soil had a strange color, darker than the surrounding earth, almost gray in places. It smelled faintly metallic when the breeze shifted, like wet stone after rain. Jess crouched beside it. Don't touch it, Mark said. I'm just looking. She brushed aside a few needles near the edge of the patch. The dirt underneath looked freshly turned but oddly compacted, as if something beneath it had pushed upward. Feels warm, she murmured. I frowned. Warm? Jess nodded, standing up again. A little. We stared at the circle of chairs. They were all identical except for one, an older canvas chair with faded green fabric. Its armrest had a cup holder stitched into the side. Mark finally shrugged. Whatever. Let's move them. He picked up the closest chair and folded it. The soil in the center shifted slightly. Just a subtle settling, like sand sinking after someone steps away. None of us said anything about it. We stacked the chairs beside the picnic table and set up camp normally. Tent behind the table, cooler under the bench, lantern hanging from a low branch. By sunset, the campground was full. A family at Site 21 roasted marshmallows, their lantern casting a warm yellow glow. 2 college-aged guys across the loop were playing cards at their picnic table. Someone down the road had a radio playing softly. Highway noise drifted faintly over the hills. Normal. Comfortable. Still, the patch of soil bothered me. Even after we moved the chairs, it sat there in the middle of the clearing like a scar. The dirt seemed darker in the lantern light. Jess noticed it too. Does it look bigger? Mark rolled his eyes. It's dirt. But he avoided stepping on it. Later that night, we built a fire and opened beers. The air cooled quickly once the sun dropped behind the trees. Smoke drifted lazily upward, catching the glow of nearby lanterns. Somewhere a dog barked once and then went quiet. Around 10, the campground started settling down. Radios switched off. Tents zipped shut. The 2 guys playing cards packed up and disappeared into their camper van. Jess yawned and stretched. All right, I'm done. We doused the fire and crawled into our tents. The night felt unusually still. Even the highway noise had faded. I woke sometime later to the sound of fabric creaking. At first I thought it was the tent shifting in the wind. Then I realized there wasn't any wind. The creaking came again. Soft. Rhythmic. I unzipped the tent a few inches and looked out. Moonlight washed over the campsite in pale blue. The chairs were back. All 6 of them. Arranged again in a circle. Around the disturbed soil. My stomach tightened. We had stacked them beside the picnic table. I was sure of it. The chairs faced inward exactly like before. Empty. Waiting. I stepped outside. The ground felt cold beneath my feet. The soil in the center of the circle looked darker now, almost black in the moonlight. A faint smell drifted up from it. Damp, mineral, like the inside of a cave. Jess crawled out of her tent behind me. What are you doing? She stopped when she saw the chairs. Did you move those? No. Mark emerged a moment later. Why are we rearranging furniture at? He froze. Oh. We approached slowly. The soil looked different now. Not just turned. Raised. Like something underneath it had pressed upward during the night. Jess crouched again despite Mark's earlier warning. She shined her flashlight across the surface. The beam caught something faint beneath the dirt. A shape. Circular. Do you see that? She whispered. Mark knelt beside her. It's stone. They brushed the soil carefully aside. A flat rock slab lay just beneath the surface. Smooth. Gray. Perfectly round. Carved. Faint symbols covered its surface, worn but still visible under the light. Lines spiraling inward toward a small hole in the center. Jess leaned closer. What language is that? Mark shook his head. Not language. He traced one of the grooves. It's a pattern. The soil shifted again. All three of us jerked back. The ground bulged upward slightly, pushing against the carved stone. From somewhere in the campground came a sound. A zipper opening. We turned towards Site 21. The family's tents stood silent. Their lantern had gone out. No voices. No movement. Maybe they're asleep, Jess said quietly. Then we noticed the bikes. 2 small bikes lay abandoned in the gravel road. Their owners nowhere in sight. Mark whispered, "Where did everyone go?" The campground had become impossibly quiet. No laughter. No footsteps. Not even the distant highway. Only the soft shifting of soil beneath the stone. The chairs creaked. We looked back. They had moved. Closer. Each one inching inward toward the circle. Mark grabbed one and dragged it away. The legs scraped loudly against the dirt. The sound echoed across the empty campground. The soil responded. A low vibration traveled through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. Jess grabbed my arm. "Did you feel that?" I nodded. The carved stone trembled. More soil crumbled away from its edges, and the smell intensified. Wet earth mixed with something older, deeper, like the air from a sealed basement long forgotten. Mark stepped back slowly. "I think we should leave." But the chairs kept shifting. Not fast. Just enough that we could hear the fabric stretch and settle. One by one they tightened the circle, facing the stone, facing the hole in its center. Jess's voice dropped to a whisper. "This isn't random." I looked around the campground. All the other sites stood empty now. Tents still pitched. Coolers still outside. But no people anywhere. And every campsite had the same thing. Chairs, arranged in circles, around patches of freshly turned earth. Mark followed my gaze. Oh no! The soil beneath the stone split open with a quiet crack. The hole in its center widened slightly. Cold air rushed out of it. Air that smelled impossibly old. Jess backed away. "What is that?" Mark stared at the spiraling carvings. "I think it's not a grave," he said slowly. The chairs creaked again, settling into their final positions. Perfectly spaced, facing inward, waiting. The hole in the stone pulsed once, and something deep beneath the ground answered. Not with movement, but with a sound. A long inhale. Mark swallowed hard. "I think," he whispered, "this campground isn't for campers." The soil bulged again. The circle tightened. And for the first time, I realized the chairs weren't arranged for watching something come out. They were arranged so no one inside the circle could get out.